Think about the worst leader you've ever had. Now ask yourself one question. Were they always like that? Or did something happen to them when they got the job? Because here's what nobody tells you about power. We spend an enormous amount of time arguing about who should have it. Which politician, which CEO, which person is trustworthy enough, smart enough, moral enough to be put in charge. And almost no time asking the question that actually matters. What does power do to the people who hold it? Today we are going to follow a single thread. It runs through a Florentine diplomat, writing by candlelight in 1513, through a president sabotaging a peace deal to win an election, through a near-bankrupt tech company that handed total control to one man and was somehow saved by it, and through a single blog post written by someone with no title and no budget that brought down one of the most powerful companies in Silicon Valley. The thread is this: power doesn't just corrupt people, it selects for the corruptible, and the only real defense in finding better leaders is building better systems. Let's go. My name is The Professor, and if you're on this channel, if you found this video, clicked on it, and are still watching past the first 90 seconds, I already know something about you. You're not here to be told what to think. Most content out there is designed to confirm what you already believe, to flatter your existing opinions, to give you the comfortable feeling of understanding the world. This channel exists for the people who want the other version. Not cynicism, not conspiracy, just the actual mechanics. If that's you, welcome, you're in the right place. Now, let's talk about a man who got thrown in prison for knowing too much about how power actually works. In 1513, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli was sitting under house arrest, recently unemployed, recently tortured, and recently stripped of everything he'd spent his career building. He decided to write a book. That book, The Prince, would become the most misread political text in history, because everyone reduces it to one line: the ends justify the means. And once you've reduced it to that, you can use it to justify almost anything. Corporate backstabbing, political manipulation, the guy in your office who throws colleagues under the bus and calls it strategic thinking. But that's not what Machiavelli was saying. Machiavelli had just watched his entire world collapse. Florence, the republic he'd served for 14 years, was dismantled in a matter of weeks. He understood from direct personal experience that the world of power is not a morality play. Good intentions don't hold cities together. Honest men get outmaneuvered by ruthless ones. The question is this person a good person? Is almost entirely separate from the question, will this person be a good leader? The overlap exists, but it's smaller than we'd like to believe. Here's what makes Machiavelli genuinely radical 5 centuries later. He wasn't celebrating cynicism, he was diagnosing it. He was saying, this is how power actually works. Now decide what you want to do with that information. Most people, when handed that information, do one of two things. They either use it as permission to behave badly, or they look away because the alternative in accepting that power is structurally resistant to virtue is too uncomfortable to sit with. We're going to sit with it. The year is 1968. America is exhausted. The Vietnam War has killed tens of thousands of Americans and far more Vietnamese, and the public has turned decisively against it. The Johnson administration is quietly moving toward a peace agreement that could end the bloodshed, and Richard Nixon, running for president, makes a decision. If peace comes before the election, his opponent gets the credit. His opponent wins. Nixon loses. So Nixon's team, through a back channel, secretly contacts the South Vietnamese government. The message is essentially this: don't sign anything, stall, well, give you a better deal when we win. The peace talks collapse, the war continues. An estimated 20,000 more Americans die in the following years, to say nothing of the Vietnamese. Nixon wins the election. Now, hold that story in your mind, because here's the thing that makes it useful rather than just horrifying. Nixon was not a monster at the start of his career. He was a complicated, insecure, politically gifted man who wanted power, and who, at a crucial moment, calculated that prolonging a war was worth it for his own advancement. This is what Machiavelli was pointing at. Not that power makes people evil, but that power creates a specific kind of pressure, and under that pressure, the line between smart political calculation and moral catastrophe becomes very easy to cross without noticing you've crossed it. And here's the question that should genuinely unsettle you. How many people, given exactly Nixon's position, exactly Nixon's incentives, and exactly Nixon's lack of accountability, would have made a different choice? Not as many as we'd like to think. But here's the tension that makes power genuinely complicated, and why this isn't simply a story about bad people doing bad things. Sometimes, the concentration of power in one person's hands is the only thing that prevents a catastrophe. In 1997, Apple was 12 weeks from bankruptcy, not struggling, not in a rough patch. 12 weeks from the end, the company had lost its identity, its focus, and its reason to exist. The board brought back Steve Jobs, the same man they'd thrown out a decade earlier, and gave him something close to unlimited authority. Jobs cut 70% of Apple's product line. He eliminated entire divisions. He made decisions unilaterally that conventional corporate governance would have taken years to debate. He was, by any reasonable measure, running the company as a dictatorship, and it worked spectacularly. The British philosopher Thomas Hobbes would have recognized this moment immediately. Hobbes, writing in the 1640s, after watching England tear itself apart in civil war, argued something deeply unflattering about human nature, that without a strong central authority, people default to self-interest, mutual suspicion, and eventually conflict. His question, which has never fully lost its bite, was this: if people are naturally cooperative and peaceful, why do you lock your front door at night? His point wasn't that people are evil. It was that rational self-interest in conditions of uncertainty produces outcomes that are bad for everyone, and that a strong authority, even an imperfect one, is preferable to the alternative. This is why societies in crisis reach for strong leaders, not because they've stopped caring about rights or checks and balances or democratic procedure, but because abstract principles feel like a luxury when the building is on fire. The problem, and this is the problem Hobbes never fully solved, is what happens after the fire is out. Because the authority that was granted in the emergency very rarely hands itself back voluntarily. In the early 20th century, a sociologist named Robert Michaels studied something that deeply puzzled him. Socialist political parties, organizations explicitly built on the principle of equality, built to oppose concentrated power, were, without exception, becoming oligarchies. The most egalitarian organizations in the world were producing tiny ruling circles that controlled everything. He called it the Iron Law of Oligarchy. And it works like this. Every organization, regardless of its founding ideology, eventually concentrates decision-making in the hands of a few. Why? Because someone has to send the emails. Someone has to run the meetings. Someone gains access to the money. And the people who control the logistics of an organization, gradually, almost invisibly, come to control the organization itself. The implications are uncomfortable for everyone. For the left, it means that revolutionary organizations tend to reproduce exactly the power structures they were built to destroy. The Soviet Union, formerly a workers' state with no bourgeois elite, produced one of the most rigid class hierarchies of the 20th century. The people at the top were simply called comrades instead of executives. For the right, it means that corporations presented as meritocracies where talent rises frequently become systems where people who are safe for existing power rise, not people who are most capable. Vilfredo Pareto, Michael's contemporary, went even further. He argued that elite classes don't just accumulate power, they build invisible barriers to keep it. The right schools, the right networks, the right accent, the right way of being in a room. And then, crucially, they convince themselves, and often others, that these advantages are simply evidence of merit. This is perhaps the most insidious form of power. Not the kind that says you are not allowed here. The kind that has arranged things so that you never thought to try. There's a name for what happens to leaders who hold power for too long without adequate checks. The psychiatrist David Owen, himself a former British Foreign Secretary, called it Hubris Syndrome. The symptoms are specific and consistent across very different leaders in very different contexts. An unshakable belief that they alone understand the situation. A contempt for procedure and institutional constraint. A tendency to confuse their own interests with the interests of the organization, the country, the mission. An inability to process criticism as anything other than disloyalty. Owen's argument, backed by case studies from Thatcher to Blair to a long list of CEOs, is that this is not a character flaw that precedes power. It is a response to power, specifically to the combination of genuine authority, constant deference, and the absence of honest feedback. When every room you walk into changes because you've entered it, when people laugh at your jokes, agree with your assessments, and explain away your mistakes, your brain's calibration system quietly breaks. And here is the part that should concern all of us. The people most likely to pursue power are often the people least equipped to handle what it does to them. February 19, 2017, a woman named Susan Fowler, an engineer who had recently left Uber, published a blog post. She had no investors, no board seat, no legal team. She was one person with a website and something true to say. Within 48 hours, the story was everywhere. Within months, Uber's CEO had resigned, an independent investigation had begun, and the company's internal culture, which powerful people had quietly tolerated for years, was being dismantled under public pressure. The French philosopher Michel de Certeau spent much of his career studying exactly this dynamic, the difference between what he called the strategies of the powerful and the tactics of the weak. Strategy belongs to those with territory, an office, a budget, a title, the right to set the agenda. Tactics belong to those who operate inside a system they didn't design and can't change directly, who find instead the cracks, the gaps, the moments when the system is briefly not watching. The powerful make the rules. The powerless learn the rules well enough to use them against their makers. History is full of examples. The labor movements of the early 20th century, the civil rights movement's use of economic boycotts, Soviet citizens who learned to perform compliance so perfectly that the system produced nothing useful, and Susan Fowler, who understood that in 2017, one credible, specific, well-written account, published publicly, was more powerful than any HR complaint she could ever have filed internally. But, and this matters, none of these tactics work without one thing: coordination. Other people who are willing to say, yes, that is true, and I will stand behind it. And coordination is the thing that concentrated power is most afraid of. Here's what we've actually learned. Machiavelli was right that power has its own logic, and that logic doesn't care about your intentions. Nixon showed us what that logic produces when there are no brakes. Hobbes showed us that sometimes, in a crisis, concentrated power is the only thing that works, which is exactly why it's so dangerous to normalize it. Pareto's and Machiavelli showed us that every system, left alone, drifts toward oligarchy. Owen showed us that power doesn't just attract corrupt people, it creates them, gradually, neurologically, in anyone who holds it long enough without accountability. So what do you do with all of that? The naive answer is, find better people, more honest politicians, more ethical CEOs, more virtuous leaders, and yes, character matters. But character without structure is a gamble, and history is littered with people who started with good intentions and excellent character, and ended up doing terrible things because the system they operated in made terrible things rational. The real answer is structural, not saints, systems, not trust verification, not the right leader, the right constraints on any leader. Term limits, financial transparency, independent oversight, genuine whistleblower protection, multiple centers of power that have to negotiate with each other. These are not exciting. They don't make good campaign slogans. They're not the stuff of inspiring leadership biographies. But they are the difference between a society that slowly corrects its mistakes and one that has no mechanism for correction at all. You probably won't run a country. You might run a team, or a company, or a school committee, or a neighborhood association where I promise you the exact same dynamics we've talked about today will play out, just with worse coffee and more arguments about parking. And at some point, you will have a choice. When you have authority over something, however small, you can build a system where people around you can tell you when you're wrong. Or you can build a system where they can't. The first option is uncomfortable. The second is comfortable right up until the moment it isn't. Every person who ever seized power, every person who ever convinced themselves that their particular situation justified bending the rules, cutting the corners, silencing the critics, believed they were the exception. The lesson of history is very simple. None of them were.